All right, so we're going to jump right into this, and then we'll go into the actual 45-page indictment. Trump supporters, I hope you call in tonight, and we're going to fact check you live on the air, so you can't call in lying. We have the actual indictment right here, the 45-page indictment. I've been going through reading it. I hope you read it also. This is not Fox News. You can't come here with a bunch of nonsense. Okay, that's not going to work here. You have to call somebody else's show who's not a political commentator, somebody that doesn't read. You have to call one of their shows, okay, with that nonsense. You can't get away with that here. Also, we're going to look at this article from there's a good article from it's from the New York Times. There's a piece here from the New York Times that deals with fact checking the defenses of Trump after his latest indictment, because his attorneys, especially Lauro, it's just been on. He was on all the Sunday shows today, just lying, just making stuff up. Okay, just lying. Fact checking the defenses of Trump after his latest indictment. Former President Donald Trump supporters have made inaccurate claims, just lying, inaccurate claims about the judge presiding over his case. Judge Chakta, and misleadingly compared his conduct to that of other politicians. Okay, so we'll do some fact checking there as well with this piece here. Okay, now if we look at this article from NBCnews.com, special counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the United States. We're going to look at these 4 counts. Special counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the United States. The former president revealed last month, that'd be July, that he received a target letter from special counsel Jack Smith. Okay. Now this article is from Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Former President Donald Trump was indicted Tuesday on charges he conspired to defraud the country. Charges he conspired to defraud the United States of America. He used to lead and attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of presidential power to Joe Biden. Now, the indictment from special counsel Jack Smith's office says, quote, the purpose of the conspiracy was to overthrow the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims, of election fraud to obstruct the government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified, end quote. Okay. Now, this also deals with trying not just overturning the presidential election, but also trying to invalidate the votes of African Americans as well. This deals with that also. Okay, this is connected to that as well. All right, now let's go back to this here. Okay, we go back to the article from NBCnews.com. Now, the indictment marks a historic moment for a nation less than 250 years old. The first time a former president has faced criminal charges for trying to overturn the bedrock of democracy, a free and fair election. A bedrock of democracy, a free and fair election. Okay, also a peaceful transference of power. All right, the U.S. has had a long history, whether you agree with the result of the election or not, a long history of a peaceful transference of power. While Trump's failure to reverse his defeat was a credit to the guardrails of democracy. That's basically the courts. Okay, the courts kept things in line. The ability to prosecute him may renew the stress test on the constitutional design. The allegation that Trump used, quote, dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to subvert the 2020 election with pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud comes after a sprawling investigation that included testimony from dozens of White House aides and advisors ranging in seniority up to former President Mike Pence. Most of the people who were interviewed for the in the January 6th hearing, most of the people interviewed in the investigation, most of those who testified at January 6th hearing, most of those people were Republicans. Just so people understand, most of those people were Republicans, and a lot of them worked for Donald Trump. All right, let's continue. Now, the indictment accuses Donald Trump of taking part in three criminal conspiracies to defraud the United States by dishonesty, fraud, and deceit. To defraud the United States by dishonesty, by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit, end quote, to obstruct the electoral vote process, to, quote, impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified, and against the right against the right to vote and to have that vote counted. Now, the last charge, the last count, that is violation of Section 241 of the U.S. Criminal Code, 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against rights. This deals with the violation of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, and it was put in place to protect the voting rights of African Americans and to crack down on Ku Klux Klan violence that was taking place largely in the South, attacking African American elected officials, attacking African Americans trying to vote, and white elected officials, especially white Republicans. Okay, so it's poetic justice that Trump is being charged with this. All right, now I want to go to let's go to clip number one here. We're going to clip number one here in just a second. Okay, clip number one from NBC Nightly News. Let's continue. Now, Trump was arraigned on Thursday. Okay, and that was pretty interesting. The arraignment on Thursday. Jack Smith said after the indictment was made public, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. My office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. Now, Donald Trump's attorney, Lauro, doesn't want, he's in the news saying that basically they don't want a speedy trial. Trump doesn't want a speedy trial. Trump wants to drag this out to after the 2024, the November 2024 presidential election. Now, wait a second. If you didn't do anything wrong, if this is a Democratic witch hunt, why wouldn't you want to be quickly exonerated? Why wouldn't you want a speedy trial? If all these people are lying, if you're the only one telling the truth, if they're trying to set you up, if you're totally innocent, wouldn't you want to be exonerated? Wouldn't you want the trial before the election so you don't have that trial hanging over your head during the election so your opponents can't bring that up against you? Wouldn't you want to have your trial and as soon as possible and be exonerated of all the charges? I mean, that's if you're innocent. That's if all this stuff is made up. If you're guilty, you want the trial after the November 2024 election because you want to give yourself a presidential pardon. If you get convicted, one, or two, you want to make the investigation go away because this is a federal investigation. You want your appointed, confirmed by the Senate Attorney General to make the investigation go away. That's if you're guilty. If you're innocent, you want them to go ahead and have this trial, give your team enough time. Now, Lauro, the defense team is going to have a hard time saying, Judge, we need more time. You need more time, when he was on 5 morning shows today, 5 Sunday shows today. and he's all in the media doing interviews. Okay, defense attorney Laurel. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by. Back from break. See, we got a dumbass calling into the show already. Okay, they don't want to deal with facts. They just want to make stuff up. That's how you know you're dealing with a dumbass Trump supporter. Okay, stand by, everybody. Back from break in 4 minutes. But I tell you what, you can go visit Trump in prison when he gets convicted. If you donated money to Trump for Trump's legal defense fund. Now, just the fact that you got a quote unquote billionaire trying to raise money to pay his legal fees, right there, you have to ask who's the fool. The person lying saying he's a billionaire, or the person who's giving money to the billionaire to pay his own legal fees. Yeah, I mean, just stuck on stupid. Stand by, everybody. Okay, if you like this type of information, be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and you can register for my online history classes as well. Okay, here's the actual indictment. It's 4 counts. We're gonna go through the first 3 pages of the indictment when we come back from the break. Stand by. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Now, even Trump supporters, you can give us a call. Now, Doug, I'm telling you right now, if a dumbass Trump supporter calls in being disrespectful to you like the last dumbass caller, just hang up on them. See, you can send me a text message and let me know about it, but you have my permission to hang up on that fool, okay? Because you ain't messing with Doug, all right? That's just stupid, all right? See, this is what happens when you people can't debate facts, okay? You want to attack. So Doug sent me this text message. I'm gonna just go ahead and put this out here. This dumbass called, and I guess his name Confederate Christian or something like that. But Doug sent me this text message. You have Confederate Christian on the line. He said, Trump, quote, Trump did the most for you coloreds. He said that to my board operator, Doug. Okay. Now, if you want to debate facts, we can do that. Bring your evidence. If you want to insult people, go somewhere else. Hang up on the dumbass like that, Doug. All right. Now let's deal with this right here, because a lot of times people like that want to insult people. Okay. A lot of them can't read. All right. And they're intimidated when you got African Americans who know how to read and write. They're intimidated by educated African Americans. Now, let's look at the indictment. This is the actual indictment. It's 45 pages. I went and I got it printed up today also, but we have it up here on the screen. If you look at the article from the one I just showed you from NBC News, special counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. They have a link in there to the actual indictment. You can read a PDF of it. Articles from the New York Times, all of them, they have the actual indictment there. Okay. Now, in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, United States versus Donald J. Trump, defendant. United States versus Donald J. Trump. Trump should get used to being on that other side of the V, being the defendant, because Fannie Willis is about to tear his behind up down in Georgia also. You remember the song, The Devil Went Down in Georgia? Okay, Fannie Willis is about to tear his behind up in Georgia, because either this week or the following week, an indictment is coming from Georgia also. All right. And the trader in chief, Benedict Donald, he's going to be dealing with 5 court cases. OK. And he's going to be dealing with criminal court cases, 2 of them federal criminal court cases. You have the Mar-a-Lago case, and you have this one right here dealing with trying to overthrow the government. OK, and invalidate and stop the peaceful transfers of power and invalidate people's votes. So we have 4 charges. Count 1. 18 U.S.C. 371, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Count 2, 18 U.S.C. 1512, Section K, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Count 3, You have 18 USC 1512, section C 2, subsection 2, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. Okay, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. That was the January 6th. Okay, and you had that was a constitutionally mandated bicameral, means both chambers of the U.S. House of the U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, both chambers of Congress. That was an official proceeding that was taking place. Count 4, 18 U.S.C. section 241, conspiracy against rights. 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against rights. Now that deals with violating the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Okay, so some people, now, you know, we've talked about this here on this show before. Some people may ask, well, what's the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871? I haven't heard of that before. Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that question. Let's look at this here quickly from history.house.gov. History.house.gov. What is history.house.gov? Well, house.gov is the official website of the U.S. House of Representatives. Okay, history.house.gov. All right, history.house.gov is the history section of the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's online. You can check this out. So they have an entry here: the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, April 20th, 1871. All right. And here's a sketch, April 20th, 1871, President Ulysses S. Grant, shown with Secretary of Navy, shown with the Secretary of Navy, George M. Robeson, and Presidential Advisor, General Horace Porter, in this Frank Leslie's illustrated print, signed the Ku Klux Klan Act, which enforced the 14th Amendment by guaranteeing all citizens of the United States the rights afforded by the Constitution and providing legal protection under the law. So on this date, April 20th, 1871, the House of Representatives approved an act to enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution and for other purposes, end quote, also known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. It was introduced as H.R. 320 in the House of Representatives on March 28, 1871 by Representative Samuel Shellabarger of Ohio. The bill passed the House of Representatives on April 6, 1871, and returned from the Senate with amendments on April 14th. After nearly a week of heated debate in the House and the Senate, the chambers reconciled their differences on April 20th when the House of Representatives agreed to the conference report on H.R. 320 and the Senate concurred. Now, the Ku Klux Klan Act is the third in a series of increasingly stringent, what are known as enforcement acts, okay, which is during the Reconstruction Era. They were designed to empower the federal government to protect the civil and political rights of individuals, especially African Americans. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1868, defined citizenship and guaranteed due process and equal protection of the law to all, including 4 million formerly enslaved African American men and women. Now, white people in the South were furious, and you got some white people here in Michigan, some of them are calling into the show right now, who are furious that African Americans were given rights. Okay, vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan, however, freely threaten African Americans and their white allies. They threaten African Americans and their white allies in the South and undermine the Republican Party's plan for Reconstruction. The Ku Klux Klan Act made it a federal crime to deny any group or individual, quote, any of the rights, privileges, or immunities or protection named in the U.S. Constitution. To enforce the law, the President of the United States could suspend habeas corpus, that means having your day in court, having a trial, deploy the U.S. military, or use other means as he may deem necessary. Okay. Now, what happened was, so Ulysses S. Grant signs the bill into law April 20th. Nearly 6 months later, in October of 1871, President Ulysses S. Grant used the powers of the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 in several South Carolina counties. It was actually 9 South Carolina counties. He declared martial law, demonstrating the willingness of the Republican-led federal government. Now, this is long before coup plotters and things like this. This is before the Republican Party back at this time is dead now, because this is before the party realignment was completed in 1968, when Richard Nixon won the presidency on the platform of law and order, which was a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the rebellions that were taking place at that time, any advancements African Americans were making. He ran as a backlash to all of that. Okay. So you have to go study the party realignment. I've done a 3-hour lecture dealing with the history of the party realignment, which did not start with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It did not start with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The party realignment goes back to 1928 in what's known as the Lily White Movement of 1928. The Lily White Movement of 1928, where Republicans ran Herbert Hoover as their presidential candidate in the 1928 presidential election against a moderate Democrat from New York named Al Smith. And Republicans appealed to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states to get them to vote for Herbert Hoover. And they started ignoring the issues and concerns of African Americans. They were ignoring the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, because the Ku Klux Klan became very powerful again in the 1920s as a result of the movie The Birth of a Nation that we talked about before the last break at the beginning of the show. The Birth of a Nation, February 8th, 1915, which showed the Ku Klux Klan as the heroes. The movie The Birth of a Nation is based upon a novel by a man named the Reverend Thomas Dixon. The name of the novel was called The Klansman, and it shows the Ku Klux Klan as being the saviors of the white South by putting down a rebellion of former Union Negro soldiers. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break and connect all of this history to laws and policies existing today. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation. Okay, let's go back to the federal indictment. Then we'll go to the phone lines here in just a minute. Okay, so we were right before the break, we were discussing the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, because that plays right into the 4th charge. All right, and I have some more information on that for you. But I want to let's go back to the federal indictment here. All right, let's flip this over. And I encourage everybody to read the indictment as well. And the article that I showed you from NBCnews.com, special counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. They have a link to the indictment in that. They have a link to the indictment actually in that article. All right, let's see. Let's go back to it right here. All right. Okay, so the indictment, the grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment or on or about the dates and the approximate times stated below. Introduction to the indictment. This is page 1. Okay, number 1, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. 2, despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. The defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following election day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyway to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Number three, the defendant had a right, like every so now you're gonna have Trump supporters and they're lying. Lauro's lying on TV. You have Republicans out here lying. Byron Donalds was on Fox News lying, okay, saying that this is an attack on the First Amendment. No, it's not an attack on the First Amendment, because on page 2, Special Counsel Jack Smith says the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. So Jack Smith is saying Donald Trump had a right to lie. And, you know, just like the Beastie Boys said, you got a right to fight to party, Donald Trump has a right to lie. He can lie, but what you can't do is conspire to overturn election results. Okay, that's illegal. You can go out and lie all you want to. Okay, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits, like in Arizona, okay, in Phoenix, or audits of the popular vote in states, or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures, okay, just like they were challenging election results here in Detroit. And he was challenging election results in areas that had high African-American populations: Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia. Okay, what's that about? Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. There were 61 lawsuits. There were 61 lawsuits that Donald Trump and his cronies filed. They lost 60 of the 61 lawsuits. The one lawsuit they won was in Philadelphia, and that dealt with how close poll challengers could be to people counting the ballots. That's the one they won. The other 60, they lost. The cases were dismissed, or they lost in court, things of this nature. Okay. So this is Trump is just lying. He's just running game on people. And this fool, now you have to ask yourself the question, who's the fool? Because he raised $250 million in the 2 months after the election. He raised $250 million from losers and suckers who were sending him money to file all these legal claims and have all these lawsuits saying they were going to overturn the election results. You have to ask yourself the question, who's the fool? The one who is scamming people, or the people being scammed? Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Mooch, line 1. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from, Mooch.
Hey, Brad. I'm actually from the Circleville guy with the racist cop took the dog on the black truck driver.
Yeah, which city you from?
I'm from around Circleville, Ohio. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your voice is a little muffled, but okay, you're from Ohio?
Yeah. You know with a cop took the dog on the truck driver.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. The police officer sicked the dog on the black truck driver. Yeah, that just happened the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm from there. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
So I'm a brother. We got a few here.
Okay.
I was gonna say, man, I first time calling.
Okay.
And I listen to your show every now and then I can, and I'm actually not 25 on YouTube. And Luke is my nickname. I run a boxing martial arts thing. So what I was going to say was these two black conservative clowns. One's name is Mind of Jamal, and the other is a Big Ward, the Genius. They like real big on YouTube. They're black Trump supporters. These two wrote me just out of nowhere, and was talking about how the black people, Trump's did everything for black people, and we don't appreciate him and all this. And I'm like,
what did they say? They said Trump did like what for black people?
They couldn't say. That's what I'm saying. If you get a chance, look here. If you get a chance, look up Mind of Jamal, and then look on YouTube, and then this other clown. It's called Big Ward, the Genius. And these brothers, all they do, they ain't even brothers to me. All they do is get on their YouTube. They're on YouTube, and all they do is get on and they bash black folks. I mean, it's crazy to see. Like I said, I run a channel that martial arts and stuff. So for some reason, these two clowns was in my comments the other day. You know, they were talking about fighting and stuff, and then all of a sudden Trump's name come up. And they asked me if I would support him. I'm like, hell no, I don't support that dude. And it was like, why?
Right.
I'm like, hey, I don't have nothing to do with him. And it's, you know, where I live out here in Round Circleville, all you see is Confederate flags and Trump flags.
Okay, out in Ohio.
Down here.
Right.
We don't get along. So I'm just saying, I don't like him, but yeah, they couldn't answer me what Trump's done for us.
Right. So they're just repeating a bunch of nonsense. Okay, look, we're coming up on the break. What I want you to do is, I think you're watching on YouTube. But okay, so everybody, now you all know I deal with facts and evidence. Let's look at this fact sheet here. This is from whitehouse.gov. People can go research this. Fact sheet: the Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunity for Black Americans and communities across the country. This shows you how the policies from the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African-American community. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. Okay, thanks for calling, Mooch. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right. Yep, you heard they played the clip from my show. Some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. Okay. Welcome back to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Sunday, August 6, 2023, and we're live. And that fact sheet that I showed you, you hear me talk about it, Roland Martin Unfiltered. You've heard me, we've gone through it here on the African History Network show a few times, different iterations of it, because it was first published October 2021. This is the latest one that I've seen. It was published February 27, 2023. This shows you category by category how the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African-American community, from the American Rescue Plan to the infrastructure bill to lowering energy costs and creating economic opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act, from the $5.8 billion that HBCUs received in 2021 from the Biden-Harris administration. All of that, it goes through and breaks everything down. And so you can, the last time I checked, this was about 36 pages, providing historic support for historically Black colleges and universities. The Biden-Harris administration has delivered nearly $6 billion cumulative investment through the Department of Education to support HBCUs. There was money in the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan and other pandemic relief programs have provided approximately $3.7 billion to HBCUs since President Biden took office. An estimated 450,000 HBCU students have received emergency financial aid grants through this funding since the start of 2021. They go through, they show category by category how the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African-American community. Now, you go compare this to what any of these black Republicans out here are saying, any of these white Republicans. You go compare this to what any of them are saying. You go compare this to Donald Trump, compare this to his record, etc. And then compare this to how Republicans are voting, because they consistently, overwhelmingly vote against our own interests. Okay. They voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. They voted against the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. They voted against the Crown Act. They voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. They voted against only 19 voted for the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, only 19 in the Senate and only 14 out of the House of Representatives. That's out of over close to 260 Republicans. Okay. Only 19 in the Senate and 14 in the House. All right. They voted against decriminalizing marijuana, largely voted against that as well. Okay. So go check this out. The name of this document, this is at whitehouse.gov. They have all types of helpful information at whitehouse.gov. Fact sheet: the Biden-Harris administration advances equity and opportunity for Black Americans and communities across the country. All right, now let's go back to this indictment. All right, let's see here. Okay, so we were on page 2 of the indictment against Donald Trump, 4 counts. This deals with the January 6th probe. Okay. United States of America versus Donald John Trump, defendant. Let's go back to page 2. All right. Now, number 4 on page 2. Shortly after Election Day, the defendant, Donald John Trump, also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In so doing, the defendant perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. A conspiracy to defraud the United States of America by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. 371, Section 371. That's 18 U.S.C. that's dealing with the United States Criminal Code. Okay. So let me repeat this. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371. Now, once again, in the introduction of page 2, in item number 3, Special Counsel Jack Smith said Donald Trump had the right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. So Trump had a right to lie. Trump did not have a right to conspire, to throw out votes, conspire to overturn election results. B, a conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding, January 6, 2021 congressional proceeding, at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified. The certification proceeding in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1512 Section K. C, a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 241, most popularly known as the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Now, the indictment goes on to say each of these conspiracies, which built on the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election, the federal government function. Okay, Doug, let's go to clip number 1. All right, I want to go to clip number 1. Now, this is from NBC Nightly News. This is from Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Trump indicted in special counsel's 2020 election probe. Okay, and they give us an overview of what happened. Let's go to clip number 1, Doug.
Donald Trump's legal jeopardy became much more serious late today after the former president was indicted for a third time, this time by a federal grand jury in Washington, investigating his alleged attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. In the new indictment, Mr. Trump is charged with 3 counts of conspiracy and 1 count of obstruction. He was summoned to appear on Thursday before a federal magistrate judge in Washington. The indictment also mentions 6 unnamed and unindicted co-conspirators. It says Mr. Trump and the co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results. Just moments ago, special counsel Jack Smith called the January 6th attack on the Capitol an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy, an attack, he said, that was fueled by lies. Late today, the Trump campaign again called it a witch hunt and interference in the current presidential election, in which Mr. Trump is the Republican frontrunner by a wide margin. We have it all covered tonight, starting with senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett.
Tonight, former President Donald Trump facing a blistering new indictment from special counsel Jack Smith, this time for his actions leading up to the Capitol riot on January 6th. Including, prosecutors say, trying to steal the election from the winner, President Biden. The indictment alleging Mr. Trump was determined to remain in power and spread lies about winning the 2020 election, saying these claims were false and the defendant knew they were false. The former president faces 4 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Prosecutors described an alleged criminal scheme that Mr. Trump launched after Election Day in an indictment that also details 6 unnamed co-conspirators. Prosecutors did not charge Mr. Trump with inciting the January 6th riot. The special counsel speaking out late tonight.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant, targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government.
Tonight's indictment against the Republican frontrunner, the second one from special counsel Jack Smith, just last week adding new counts in that classified documents case, accusing Mr. Trump of trying to delete surveillance video subpoenaed by DOJ. Prosecutors say co-defendant Carlos de Oliveira told another Mar-a-Lago employee the boss wanted it erased. The former president posting, Mar-a-Lago tapes were not deleted. They were voluntarily handed over. I never told anybody to delete them. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty in that case, slated to go to trial next May in the heat of the Republican primary. And then there's his trial set for March. Manhattan's DA indicted Mr. Trump for falsifying business records. The former president pleading not guilty there, too. And in Fulton County, Georgia, where barricades are up, the DA says she'll announce this month if Mr. Trump will face charges for trying to overturn the election results in that state.
We're ready to go.
Former President Trump has been summoned to appear in a Washington, D.C. courtroom this Thursday.
All right, Laura, thank you. Immediate reaction tonight from the former president. Garrett Hake is following that part of the story. Garrett, the Republican frontrunner tonight slamming these charges and this prosecutor.
That's right, Lester. The former president and his campaign had long anticipated he would face charges in this case, and they were ready with a statement almost the moment the indictment was unsealed, calling the charges part of an un-American witch hunt against the president and asking why it took 2.5 years to bring what he calls these fake charges right in the middle of President Trump's winning campaign for 2024. The statement answers their own rhetorical question, saying this is an act of election interference, echoing something we've heard repeatedly from Mr. Trump on the campaign trail. Now, reaction is still coming in from Republican elected officials around the country. Most congressional Republicans coming to the former president's defense with statements also pre-prepared for this moment. Most of his other campaign rivals so far still silent. His top rival, Ron DeSantis, out with a statement saying he has not read the indictment, but suggests that there is political prosecution at work here, something that he would end should he be president. Lester?
All right, Garrett Hicks, thank you.
Okay, we're coming up on the break. When we come back from the break, we're going to finish that up from NBC Nightly News from August 1st, 2023. All right, you listen to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. When we come back, we'll get deeper into the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, but also the history behind why the U.S. Department of Justice was created in the first place in 1870 during Reconstruction. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. Okay, Doug, let's go back and finish that clip from NBC Nightly News, please.
Laura Jarrett back with me, as well as Chief Justice contributor Jonathan Deans. If you step back for a moment, this is astonishing what we witnessed over the last several weeks. Can we talk about the confirmation of these unindicted co-conspirators and why they would not be named or indicted at this point?
Well, it's possible that the special counsel's office is still gathering information on some of them. We're working to confirm some of the names, but based off of what we can piece together, just from what's public, it appears many of them are actually the former president's own lawyers, which is quite unusual and part of what makes this case so complicated.
Yeah, Jonathan, you've got some reporting on that.
Yes, it's 4 lawyers, 1 Justice Department official, 1 political consultant. We spoke with an attorney for John Eastman, one of the lawyers, who is an unindicted co-conspirator number 2. His lawyer confirms he is named in these charging documents as unindicted co-conspirator number 2, and he allegedly came up with this plan, this idea, to pressure the vice president to not certify the election results, to come up with this fake electors plot, alleged plot, and that he was behind it. Now, his attorney tells us they plan to file a memo with the special counsel's office to show them why this was just legal thinking, coming up with ideas, and why he should not be prosecuted or charged criminally. Again, today it was Trump, and Trump charged alone. There are 6 others named as alleged co-conspirators, unindicted co-conspirators, and to be determined if in the days and weeks ahead they get target letters notifying them that they could be charged next.
Yeah, and Laura, looking at what we know so far, it's likely that some important meetings that the former president took could loom large in this prosecution.
Well, and you see many of them detailed here, and it also appears that many people took notes, including the former vice president of the United States took contemporaneous notes the prosecutors got their hands on, and clearly they're using now to bolster their case. And they also lay out, again in detail here, all of the times that Mr. Trump was told that the things that he was saying were false, told by people like the vice president, by senior leaders of the Justice Department, by the director of national intelligence, that the reason that they're including that information is because prosecutors have to show that he had a corrupt mindset. And one of the ways it appears that they're going to do that is to show that he was put on notice by people who were in the best position to know that what he was saying was not true.
Do we know anything about the judge, or has the judge even been assigned in this case yet?
Last I checked, the judge hadn't been assigned, and so we'll see who's on the wheel here. But it's worth noting this is a district that is very well acquainted with the facts of the case, as everybody is on January 6th. But this district has obviously heard so many cases from the people who actually stormed the Capitol. So all of the judges are going to be very much up to speed on the facts.
All right, Laura and Jonathan, thanks very much for all that.
News. We know that Judge Tanya Chuckton, federal judge, is presiding over the case. She's a black woman of Jamaican descent. She was appointed by President Barack Obama in 2013. TheGrio.com has an article dealing with this. If we flip over to this piece here from The Grio. Let's go to this here. Just a second. Who is Tanya Chuckton? Chutkan. Who is Tanya Chuckton? The judge presiding over Trump's January 6th indictment. Judge Tanya Chuckton, who was appointed by former President Barack Obama, has served on the district court bench since 2014. This article is from Garen Keith Gaynor, August 2nd, 2023, for thegrio.com. Let's see here. And it says Trump's case in Washington, D.C. will be presided over by a black woman, District Judge Tanya S. Chuckton of the U.S. District Court for Washington, D.C. Here's a picture of her here for Washington, D.C. The Jamaican-born American was randomly assigned, just like Judge Eileen Cannon in the Mar-a-Lago case, who was a Trump appointee. She's randomly assigned as well. The Jamaican-born American was randomly assigned to the case in which Trump has been charged with 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, 2 counts of obstructing vote certification proceedings, and 1 count of conspiracy to violate civil rights. Judge Chuckton, who was appointed by former President Barack Obama, has served on the district court bench since 2014. It's worth noting that Chuckton received overwhelming bipartisan support in her U.S. Senate confirmation with a 95-0 vote. Both Democrats and Republicans overwhelmingly voted for Judge Tanya Chuckton. Now you have Democrats like Lindsey Graham, Republicans like Lindsey Graham, some of these other Republicans who are out here attacking the judge, whining and crying. What's his name? Out of Texas, Ted Cruz, Cancun Ted Cruz, whining and crying. According to her biography on the court's website, Judge Tanya Chuckton graduated from George Washington University with a bachelor's degree in economics and received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. While at Penn Law, she served as an associate editor of the Law Review and was a legal writing fellow. After law school, Judge Chuckton was a public defender for 11 years in Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. As a trial attorney and supervisor, she tried over 30 cases, including numerous serious felony matters, according to district court. She has presided over several cases related to the January 6th Capitol attack. In her rulings and statements, if her rulings and statements are any indication of how she will preside over the Trump criminal case, the former president may be in for a bumpy trial. As previously reported by CNN in November 2021, Judge Chuckton denied Trump's attempt to block the House Select Committee on the January 6th attack from assessing more than 700 documents from the Trump White House. Though Trump's legal team argued that the House committee subpoena of White House records violated executive privilege and exceeded Congress's constitutional power, Judge Chuckton, in her ruling, declared that, quote, presidents are not kings and plaintiff Trump is not president. Presidents are not kings and plaintiff Trump is not president. Judge Chuckton does not play. Donald Trump has met his match. Donald Trump is in deep, deep trouble. That's why he's going crazy on his Twitter knockoff, Truth Social. Okay, let's go back to the indictment because we're coming up on a break here. All right, now, okay, so we did that. Okay, so you can go through, look at this. Okay, count 1. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 of this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference. You have conspiracy from on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 20th, 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the defendant. Okay, conspiracy. Let's see here. Okay, you go read the rest of that because we run out of time here. I want to show you this slide here. Okay, let's look at this on the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. This is the third of the 4 enforcement acts. This information comes from Britannica.com. I teach this in my my Sunday class, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay, what were the force acts during Reconstruction? FORCE, the force acts. Now, force acts in U.S. history were a series of 4 acts, FOUR, 4 acts passed by the Republican Reconstruction supporters in the Congress between May 31st, 1870 and May 1st, 1875 to protect the U.S. to protect the constitutional rights guaranteed to African Americans by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The major provisions of the acts authorize federal authorities to enforce penalties upon anyone interfering with the registration, voting, office holding, or jury service of African Americans, provided for federal election supervisors, and empowered the President of the United States to use military forces to make summary arrests. Under the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, on April 20th, 1871, 9 counties in South Carolina were placed under martial law. So it was signed into law April 20th, 1871. Now, October of 1871, President Ulysses S. Grant used the Ku Klux Klan Act to place 9 counties in South Carolina under martial law. This act and earlier statutes resulted in more than 5,000 indictments and 1,250 convictions throughout the South. In subsequent Supreme Court decisions, various sections of the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 were declared unconstitutional, but it's still on the books. It's still being used, and it's the 4th charge against Donald John Trump. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, Doug, we're going to clip 2 here in just a minute. Clip 2 from the Today Show. All right, let's look at this article quickly here. This is from the Washington Post, August 1st, 2023. Trump is charged under civil rights law used to protect KKK violence, used to prosecute KKK violence. Trump is charged under civil rights law used to prosecute KKK violence. The provision was originally adopted in 1870 and was intended to protect the newly codified rights of Black citizens after the Civil War. Okay, so let's see. I want to go to. All right, let's see. Let's go to this paragraph here. When Donald Trump was indicted Tuesday, August 1st, 2023, and accused of trying to subvert the results of the 2020 presidential election, he found, let's see, let's go here. Okay. He found himself in the unenviable company of defendants charged under a criminal statute dating to the Reconstruction Era. So all these conservatives out here, all these Republicans, all these Black conservatives who say, oh, that was a long time ago, the Jim Crow era, the Reconstruction era, that has nothing to do with today. That's a long time ago. That's a lie. A lot of those laws are still in place, still influencing politics today, still influencing conditions today. Now, the statute is Section 241 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code, U.S. Criminal Code. It was originally adopted as part of the Enforcement Act of 1870. It was the first in a series of measures known as Ku Klux Klan Acts, Ku Klux Klan Acts, ACTS, designed to protect rights guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, collectively called Reconstruction Amendments. Section 241 of the U.S. Criminal Code makes it a crime to conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person, end quote, exercising a right protected by the Constitution or federal law. Now, the 45-page indictment, which we have been going through here on the show today, the 45-page indictment secured by Special Counsel Jack Smith accuses Donald Trump of a, quote, conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. A conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. This is in violation of Section 241. The alleged offense under Section 241 is among 4 counts included in the indictment, which argues that Donald Trump, along with 6 unnamed co-conspirators, eroded trust in the administration of the election and, quote, pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results, end quote. Now, those means, according to the indictment, include strong-arming state officials to change electoral college votes won by Joe Biden and recruiting, quote unquote, fraudulent electors, like here in Michigan, recruiting fraudulent electors in swing states prepared to override the will of voters. They were trying to, now there were 16.9 million African Americans that voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So essentially, they're trying to subvert and throw out these votes. And even if it's just 7, even if it was just 7 states that they were challenging, ultimately they would overturn the votes of 81 million people who voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. 16.9 million of the 81 million were African Americans. Now, the alleged conspiracy included using the authority of the Justice Department to create doubt about the election results and encourage the presentation of those illegitimate electors as alternatives to Biden's valid electors. And according to the indictment, it involved pressuring Vice President Mike Pence to delay or thwart the certification of Biden's victory on January 6, 2021, and capitalizing on the violence unleashed that day to, quote, levy false claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to further delay the certification based on those claims, end quote. Okay, now, if we go to, let's see, page 2, I want to scroll down here quickly. Initially wielded against the Ku Klux Klan for keeping newly emancipated Black people from exercising their right to vote. Section 241 has also been used to prosecute a wider range of election subversion. Section 241 has also been used to prosecute a wider range of election subversion, including threatening or intimidating voters, impersonating voters, destroying ballots, and preventing the official count of ballots. Now, Benny Thompson, who was the chair of the January 6th committee, he was on MSNBC today. I think he was on 4 p.m. I forget. He was on the day talking about the lawsuit that he filed against Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and some Trump cronies using the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, and some of the Capitol Hill police officers filed a lawsuit as well, using that Section 241 of U.S. Criminal Code. Now, it has become a linchpin of broader civil rights enforcement used to prosecute hate crimes and law enforcement misconduct. Derek Chauvin, the police officer who pressed his knee on George Floyd's neck in Minneapolis, Minnesota, pleaded guilty in 2021 to violating a related statute, which is Section 242 of the U.S. Criminal Code, which makes it a crime for public officials acting in their official capacity to deny a person's constitutional rights. Simone Sanders, that's who I was thinking of. Simone Sanders, MSNBC. Benny Thompson was on, I think he was on her show today, talking about the lawsuit that he had and dealing with the indictment of Trump. Okay, now, so read the rest of this article here. Excellent article. Trump is charged under civil rights law used to prosecute KKK violence. This is by Isaac Stanley Becker and Spencer S. Hsu, or Sue, HSU, August 1st, 2023, Washington Post. And if we look at this quickly here, this article from NBCnews.com. Now, we've talked about this article before. This came out February 17th, 2021. February 17th, 2021. Now, this shows you how laws and policies shape history, how historical events shape laws and policies. Name of this article, How the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act is being used in this latest Trump lawsuit. Okay. How the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act is being used in this latest Trump lawsuit. Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat from Mississippi, who is the chair of the January 6th committee, and the NAACP are using the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 in a lawsuit against former President Donald Trump and others. All right, now, Representative Benny Thompson and the NAACP are suing Donald Trump and his longtime ally, Rudy Giuliani, who quite possibly is one of the unnamed co-conspirators in this 45-page indictment, for allegedly conspiring with a pair of hate groups to storm the U.S. Capitol and block the Electoral College count in January 6, 2021. And they're using a 150-year-old law as the basis of the lawsuit. Now, Benny Thompson and the NAACP, the nation's oldest civil rights group, allege in the lawsuit obtained by NBC News that Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, the Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers used, quote, intimidation, harassment, and threats, end quote, to stop the vote count and cause the January 6th Capitol riot in the process. This, they said, violated the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Brian Levin, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, said, quote, I guess it tells you something when you can use a Ku Klux Klan law from the 1870s. It's part of a series of laws enacted after the Civil War. Everything old is unfortunately new again, end quote. Now, this, okay, so read the rest of this article. We'll continue on the other side of the break. Also, we'll talk about the passing of Harvard Law Professor Charles Olgetree. I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Friday, August 5th, discussing this. Listen to the African History Network show on Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Hey, Patrice, thanks for your support. Definitely needed that. If you'd like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show, $ the AHN show. Also through Cash App. That's through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. We have the information right on the homepage of our website. So when you scroll down past the information dealing with the online classes that I teach, first we have our social media handles, information about my Sunday night radio show on 910 AM Superstation WFDF, the African History Network show, which you listen to right now. Our 12-week online history classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Kemet's one of the original names for Egypt. The Moors and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Next class is Saturday, August 12th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. So this whole period of history, Civil War, Reconstruction Era, Jim Crow era, we deal with this in my classes. You can join us live in class or watch the archive sessions, and then we have our Cash App and PayPal information here as well, because even after the course is over, if you don't lose access to the class, you can still watch the archive classes. All right. We need to get to run out of time here. Let's see. And I really don't want to go into overtime because I have to go to work in the morning. I have to get to bed, but we'll see. We'll see how this works out. Okay. Now I wanted to get to, now 2 things, or 4 things actually. One is interesting that this indictment came down in the same week that we are commemorating the 58th anniversary of President Lyndon Baines Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act into law, August 6, 1965. This is from history.com, official website of the History Channel. This day in history, August 6, President Johnson signs Voting Rights Act. August 6, 1965. August 6, 1965, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act, guaranteeing African Americans the right to vote. The bill made it illegal. The bill made it illegal to impose restrictions on federal, state, and local elections that was designed to deny the vote to Black people. As we talked about last week on last week's show, the reason why you needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act, some of our people still don't understand this today. The reason why you needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act is because of what happened in Mississippi in 1890 and what happened in Florida, what happened in Florida in 1889 when Florida passed its poll tax law. Okay, 1889. Florida passes its poll tax law, and then in 1890, Mississippi State Convention, they vote on a new state constitution, which imposes poll taxes and literacy tests. And this was known as the Mississippi Plan, and it became adopted by other southern states. South Carolina, 1895, Louisiana, 1898, Alabama, 1901, Oklahoma, Georgia, all of them did the same thing. The Mississippi plan to keep Blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. And that's the same thing that Donald Trump and these domestic terrorists were trying to do, which is why he's being charged with violating the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, because they were trying to exclude the Negro as well. And he was in when you listen to the Georgia call that he had with Secretary of State Raffensperger, he targets Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, and he made their life hell. Okay, and you had some of these Trump crazies show up at Ruby Freeman's house, who's a mother, who's the mother, showed up at the house, and they said they were there to effectuate a citizen's arrest based upon lies that Donald Trump was spewing. Okay, now I wish there had been some brothers at that house, like the brothers that in Alabama that beat these white people's behind. Okay, when they attacked the black security guard, and Shannon Sharp posted about this on his Twitter page. All right, and people are talking about this. I wish there'd been some brothers like that when these domestic terrorists showed up to Ruby Freeman's house, but that's a whole nother show. Okay, now many people will ask the question, why was the U.S. Department of Justice created in the first place? Okay, some people may ask that question. All right, now that's a good question. Okay, the reason why the U.S. Department of Justice was created was to enforce the new rights that African Americans were given. Okay, because of the 1870 because of the Voting Rights Act of the 15th Amendment of 1870, because of the 15th Amendment of 1870. Okay, there's an article from Smithsonian.com. And let's see, can we pull this up right here? Yes, Smithsonian.com. This deals with created 150 years ago. Created 150 years ago. The Justice Department's first mission was to protect Black rights. Created 150 years ago, the Justice Department's first mission was to protect Black rights. In the wake of the Civil War, the government's new force sought to enshrine equality under the law. Now, this is a fantastic article, and I use this in my classes. You know, there's like 80 to 100 articles that we reference in the classes that I teach. This is by Brian Green, July 1st, 2020. Now, here's a picture of domestic terrorists from the White League and the Ku Klux Klan. And the White League was another domestic terrorist organization. We see them coming to exist about the 1860s or so. We see them prevalent in the 1870s. A cartoon by illustrator Thomas Nast. Now, Thomas Nast was the illustrator also who really was the one who created the image of what we know as Santa Claus, the jolly fellow with the red suit and the beard, things like this. That was Thomas Nast, also cartoonist Thomas Nast as well, who created that image coming from center class St. Nicholas, which was celebrated in amongst the Dutch in the Netherlands. Okay, and in early November of each year, there's a whole celebration and parade they have of center class coming from Spain with Zwarte Piet, Black Pete, who is a Moor, coming from Spain into the Netherlands, and they celebrate that up until like December 5th or 6th. Okay, so Amos T. Ackerman was the first Attorney General under the Department of Justice. The Office of the Attorney General existed before 1870, but the Department of Justice was not created by Congress until 1870. Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting a few more minutes. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael M. Hotep. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. All right, let's continue here. Okay, now Smitty Rock asked the question, what's your take on the book When We Ruled by Robin Walker? Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I've talked to Robin Walker. We're Facebook friends. It's a fantastic book. This was recommended to me by one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Wapa Kamene. Yeah, I need to reach out to Robin Walker to interview him on the show also. We talked through Facebook. All right, let's continue here. Now, okay, Amos T. Ackerman was an unlikely figure to head the newly formed Department of Justice. In 1870, the United States was still working to bind up the wounds torn openly by the Civil War. And this is a crucial period of time. Civil War, 1861, 1865, Reconstruction Era, 1865, 1877. Now, during this period of Reconstruction, the federal government committed itself to guaranteeing full citizenship rights to all Americans, regardless of race. At the forefront of that effort was Amos T. Ackerman, a former Democrat and enslaver. He was a former slave owner from Georgia and a former officer in the Confederate Army. So he was a former slave owner, he was a Democrat, and a former Confederate officer. Okay, but he has a change of heart and starts prosecuting Klansmen. Okay, though the United States had an attorney general since the formation of the federal government in 1789, none have been empowered with the full force of a consolidated legal team quite like Amos T. Ackerman. Now, the January 6th, the whole January 6th investigation, the arrest of over 1,000 people involved in the January 6th insurrection, the prosecution and conviction and or guilty pleas of close to 600 people. This is the largest investigation that the Department of Justice has embarked upon since they were created in 1870. Okay, this is the largest investigation that the Department of Justice embarked upon since they were created in 1870. Yeah, Robin Walker was on Happy Today. Yeah, I saw that, the Happy Today show. I've been on there as well before with Taki Grant and Sister Felicia. I've been on the show a couple of times also. All right. Now, and none had the monumental task of enforcing the 14th and 15th Amendments and new legislation delivering long overdue rights to 4 million formerly enslaved African-American men and women. This department's work on behalf of the emancipated population was so central to its early mission that Amos T. Ackerman established the department's headquarters in the Freedmen's Bank, the Freedmen's Savings Bank building. Now, in the immediate wake of the Civil War, Amos T. Ackerman, a New Hampshireite who had settled in Georgia in the 1840s, looked to the future, leaving the Democrats for the Republicans and prosecuting voter intimidation cases as a U.S. district attorney in his adopted state of New Hampshire. Reflecting on his decision to switch his allegiance to the party of Lincoln, Amos T. Ackerman said, quote, "Some of us who had adhered to the Confederacy felt it to be our duty when we were to participate in the politics of the Union to let Confederate ideas rule us no longer, regarding the subjugation of one race by the other as an abhorrence of slavery. We were content that it should go to the grave in which slavery had been buried. We were content that it should go to the grave in which slavery had been buried," end quote. Now, Amos T. Ackerman's work caught the attention of President Ulysses S. Grant, who promoted the Georgian to Attorney General in June of 1870. On July 1st of 1870, the Department of Justice which was created to handle the onslaught of post-Civil War litigation, became an official government department with Amos T. Ackerman at its helm. The focus of his 18-month tenure as the nation's top law enforcement official was the protection of Black voting rights from the systematic violence of the Ku Klux Klan. The focus of Amos T. Ackerman's 18-month tenure as the nation's top law enforcement official was the protection of Black voting rights from the systematic violence of the Ku Klux Klan. Amos T. Ackerman's Justice Department prosecuted and chased from southern states hundreds of Klansmen. He prosecuted, and his department, it wasn't just him personally prosecuting. He prosecuted his department, his Justice Department prosecuted and chased from southern states hundreds of Ku Klux Klansmen. Historian William McFeely, McFeely, in his biography on Amos T. Ackerman, wrote, "Perhaps no attorney general since his tenure has been more vigorous in the prosecution of cases designed to protect the lives and rights of Black Americans," end quote. McFeely is perhaps best known for his 1981 Pulitzer Prize winning biography, Grant, which he says he wrote in order to help him make sense of the modern civil rights movement. quote, to understand the 1960s, I studied the 1860s. This is exactly what I'm talking about, because to understand 2023, you have to understand 1963. To understand 1963, you have to, in 1963, 64, 65, you have to understand 1890, 1889, 1881, when the Tennessee state legislature segregates streetcars and public transportation, things like this. Okay, to understand 1881, you got to understand the Reconstruction Era, 1865, 1877. To understand the Reconstruction Era, you have to understand the Civil War, 1861, 1865. Understand the Civil War, you have to understand 1854, when the Republican Party is formed as a backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was a law that left up to the inhabitants of the Kansas-Nebraska territory, with people moving out west, to determine whether or not they wanted to have slavery. So it was based upon popular sovereignty as opposed to it being dictated by the federal government. It left up to those inhabitants to determine whether or not they could, whether or not they would have slavery. This infuriated abolitionists like Frederick Douglass. And the Republican Party was formed as a backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which was one of the laws that was put in place to keep a civil war from happening, just like the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which organized the land that the U.S. got from the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, when they got 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre. Okay, and that is dealing with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Okay, and we see this is going to be one of the things that leads to the U.S. Civil War taking place. All right, and let me see. Do I have the right slide show up? Let's see here. This is not what I want. I want. Okay, this one here, Black resistance movements. Where's my, hold on, let's close this out. Where's my, just a second here. We've got, I can show you this here. Let's go to presentations. Let's go to, I need, okay, Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power, 1800, 1968. All right, so where's Kansas-Nebraska Act right here? Here's a slide from the actual class. Here's a slide from the presentation of the actual class. And then you have Bleeding Kansas, where you have armed conflict. Bleeding Kansas was armed conflict, 1855, armed conflict in the Kansas territory between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. Okay, these are going to be some of the things that lead to the Civil War taking place. Well, those sentiments don't end with the end of the Civil War. They continue into the Reconstruction Era. Okay, so if we look at this here, and then we see the Mexican-American War as well, 1846, 1848, because the Compromise of 1850, which organizes the land that the U.S. gets from Mexico in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848. That's the treaty that ends the Mexican-American War, and the U.S. gets the territory that makes up California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. The Compromise of 1850 is going to organize that land that the U.S. gets from Mexico, and California is going to come into the state in 1850 under that Compromise of 1850. They come in as a free state, but then they're going to, under their first governor, Peter Burnett, they're going to try to ban all free African Americans. This is the state of California, right? But the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, 4 years after the Compromise of 1850. And now also the Compromise of 1850 consisted of 5 bills. The 5th bill was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 as well. which we see depicted in the movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman. Now, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 passed over fierce opposition in Congress and signed into law in 1854. The Kansas-Nebraska Act created the territories of Kansas and Nebraska and gave each the right to decide whether or not to permit slavery when it joined the Union. Frederick Douglass believed that popular sovereignty, as this idea was known, would resolve the, not Frederick Douglass, Stephen Douglass. Okay, this is Stephen Douglass. Stephen Douglass believed that popular sovereignty, as the idea was known, would resolve the ongoing sectional debate between North and South over slavery's extension into the territories. So read the article from history.com called Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas was armed conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups in the Kansas territory. That's going to start in about 1855, okay? And we're going to see these things that lead to the Civil War taking place. Then we go into the Reconstruction Era, 1865, 1877. And when we look at Reconstruction, okay, so this is the period of time that we're talking about when the Ku Klux Klan Act is created. The Civil War, the war destroyed the institution of slavery. It ensured the survival of the Union and set in motion economic and political changes that laid the foundation for the modern nation, wrote Eric Foner, the author of Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. Now, Eric Foner is one of the top historians on the Reconstruction era. He wrote, during Reconstruction, the United States made its first attempt to build an egalitarian society on the ashes of slavery. Okay, all right. We got to continue. I'll be here all day teaching this. Okay, now let's go to, hold on. Okay, we got to move on because I'll be here all day teaching this. But read this article here from SmithsonianMag.com. This deals with the creation of the U.S. Department of Justice and why it was created, and prosecuting a domestic terrorist like Donald Trump, prosecuting somebody who tried to overthrow the government, prosecuting somebody who tried to invalidate 16.9 million African Americans' votes, is exactly why the Department of Justice was created in the first place. Created 150 years ago, the Justice Department's first mission was to